Good evening. This is the Goffstown Capital Improvements Program Committee. I'm Jim Raymond. I'm the holdover acting chair. So as Joanne pointed out, we should take well, Tim's not here, so we should take a vote to elect me as the continuing acting chair, if that's okay with you. Tim, will you make that motion?
I make a motion, we
Okay.
elect you as continuing acting chair.
Richard, you second it?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're going to spend first we're going to introduce ourselves as we do, and then we're going to spend a few minutes just talking about what we do, because some of you are new, and I want to make sure everybody understands our role, which is a limited role. And then we'll do the administration presentation, hoping to get us out of here fairly quickly, because I haven't had supper and I get ugly. Joanne, why don't we start with you introducing yourself?
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
I'm Davis Allen. What would you like me to share about myself briefly?
Well, you're a member at large, right?
I am,
Okay.
yes, member at large.
Okay. You don't need to give your whole biography as long as the voters know how you got here, because as they watch us through the next 8 sessions or 6 sessions, as I'm sure thousands are, they will get a sense of our character and our assessment. So I think it'll become clear to them. But you may tell us whatever you want about you.
Okay. Well, I was approached about this opportunity because I'm on the zoning board, and that was sent out to all members of the zoning board to see if any of us were interested in being a member at large. And I looked through and I thought that this would be an interesting way to continue serving the town. And I'm also on the Historic District and Heritage Commission.
As an editorial comment, you will find this is the most interesting board to be on in Goffstown, because you get to see the range of the town. So I hope you agree.
It's a big process.
It is. Yeah, I guarantee it. I double your money back.
Jim McInnes, I'm on the school board, and I also serve on the Parks and Rec Committee.
I'm Jim Raymond. I'm actually a member at large. I've chaired this committee in the past and been on it for 1,000 years. That's why I'm sitting here.
Olivia Welcher-All, Budget Committee Rep.
Tim Searles, community member at large.
Who also happens to be on the planning board.
I'm on the planning board, and that's how I asked to be here. I was not, I wasn't voluntold, so I'm excited to see how the process works.
Richard Manzo, joining you as your select board rep.
And you've been on this committee before.
Indeed.
And Derek Horn, I'm your town administrator, and I'll be presenting what the chair says on all the administration projects. I'll also, either Joanne or I will be here as your staff liaison throughout the summer. So.
Okay, on that note, before we start talking too much, look in your handbooks under the green tab.
The colors might be different.
Oh,
Does it have a title in the?
it does, which says Schedule and MISC, miscellaneous. Actually, it's my second tab to remove it. There is a schedule of our meetings. It leapfrogs around planning board and vacations. That's why it's sort of intermittent. But once we get past 4th of July, well, actually, yeah, we start doing sort of every other week. And it's because planning board is on the other Thursday. Okay, let's talk for a minute, just for the new members and the thousands who are on GTV, what we are. We're an advisory committee to the planning board. Our goal is to prepare a capital improvement plan to recommend to the planning board for its adoption. So we're an advisory board. We're subject to all the rules of boards because of that. Our purpose, if you look in the handbook on page 5 and 6 under that same tab, which mine's green, but as I point out, yours might not be. The statute, RSA 674 through 8, authorizes us, gives us our charge. We're to review, come up with a program for capital improvements for the town to present to the, what called the governing bodies, Board of Selectmen, Select Board, and the school board. And they use that to prepare their budgets. You also need a capital improvements program to have impact fees. Have you dealt with them on the planning board yet?
Not much, but
Okay.
yeah, there has
Here we
been
have
some.
them. We collect impact fees on new developments, pays for a lot of things, schools and stuff. In order to do that, you have to have a CIP, a capital improvements, as well as a master plan. And have you dealt with the idea of scattered, premature and scattered developments? Okay, what that means on planning board is somebody wants to build a project out in the woods that requires a lot of municipal services. And one of the powers the town has to say, no, we can't provide those services, they're way out there, scattered and premature. And in order to support that position on the plan, where you have to have a CIP program, or it helps to have a CIP program to see, look, that's not in our schedule of projects. So there are a lot of reasons to have this program, the CIP, but the one we're going to focus on for most of the time is identifying capital needs or capital projects. I mean, it's hard, needs, wants, that gets political. We're not that. We're going to look at capital projects that are being recommended. We look at the estimated costs of them that the departments will present. I emphasize estimated, because they're not doing the kind of cost assessment they do when it comes up for final approval, because you can't. We're projecting into the future. And we look at them and we put them into a ranking, both for the 6-year scope of the plan and looking at priorities with a few goals, looking at what we need badly, what we need right now, what we may need in the future. And among the goals are to try to even out the tax burden from year to year. Notice I said even, not reduce. We are not the budget committee, we are not the select board, and we are not the school board. And we are not the voters with their infinite wisdom. If the voters in the end say, we don't want fire trucks, we don't want computer systems, that's their call. It's not ours. We are looking at the capital projects that we conclude the town should have, and looking at a way to schedule them that evens out tax burden and allows us to provide those. Again, it's a recommended, we're not making any final decisions, it's just a recommendation to the boards, school board, select board, and budget committee to help them, and with those other goals. Looking at your booklets on bottom of page 7, it says definition of capital improvement projects. These are what we look at. It's projects, it says major, rarely recurring expenditures. In other words, it means they're not necessarily in every year, although we see there are categories that do, but that cost at least $25,000 and have an expected life of at least 5 years. And then the categories on the next page: acquisition, lease of land, projects to address, other projects to address growth of the community, when we talk about community infrastructure, purchase and lease of wheeled vehicles having a life of at least 3 years and a value of more than $50,000. We've changed that over time because we were doing really small ones before. Survey studies that cost at least $25,000, and some other stuff for immediate needs. So it's not everything. And note, it's not operating budget. It's the capital improvement. So there's an operating budget that we don't look at. We consider operating budget when we look at additional costs that the project may require to support. You buy a new fire station, you got to pay janitors or cleaning staff or something. But those aren't in our numbers, they're just out there. Then look on page 11. There's a list of how we number these, of priorities, 1 through 6. 6 and 5 we hardly ever see because they don't bother bringing those to us. But essential, necessary, desirable, deferrable. And you'll see when the department heads make their presentations, they'll usually identify, if not by number, at least by description, when they need it. One of the things we can do in our recommended plan is change those numbers or change the years in which they will appear. because we may disagree with the assessment of priority, or we may want, in order to even out tax burden from year to year, move things around so you don't get big bulges in one year. You know, you build something that costs a lot in one year and there's nothing next year. We might move some stuff to even it out. But their department heads are pretty good. They've been doing this for a while, so they're attuned to that need. We found in recent years our job has become easier because they do their jobs better. Okay, I want to talk a little about, are you with me so far? Well, this is a quick review, and it's all here, but until you understand what this means, it's hard to figure out what it means just by reading it. I want to talk a little about how the town can fund projects. That's important because when we look at tax impact, you're familiar with voting on the operating budget that has an immediate tax impact in the following year. But you can also do it through other means, bondings, capital reserves, and I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed guest speaker to describe those categories.
So when you start looking at the matrix, or when you look at the individual sheets, there is an indicated funding source. A lot of the times you will see tax appropriation, so that will be, and that can be a couple of different ways. A lot of times when we have our CIP budget will be put into the operating budget. It's kind of its own department within, at least on the town side. The school has a capital reserve fund, which I'll explain in a minute, that they do a lot of their capital, there's the CIP projects out of. But, so you'll see tax appropriation, a capital reserve fund. Think of it as a savings account for a capital expense in the future. Has to be set up by the voters at town meeting. Funds have to be deposited into it by the voters at town meeting, and then you have agents to expend. School board has their CIP, town has fire apparatus, land acquisition, Grassmere Town Hall, and a conservation capital fund. So department heads are currently looking at how many capital reserve funds we have and maybe making recommendations to the select board over the summer in regards to that. So you will see some notes as you go through some of the other departments, what they're kind of, so you will also see deposits into those capital reserve funds within the matrix, but you'll also see an offsetting revenue when we're going to start pulling out funds as well. We also have different funds on the town side. We have a sewer enterprise fund. So when sewer comes and presents to you, those are all user fees. Those are not funded by taxes. Those are for people that are hooked up to sewer. And then we have EMS, our ambulance revolving fund. And that's paid for by patients that use that service. We bill their insurance or bill them, and they reimburse the town for that ambulance trip and the treatment that they get. And then if we have an ambulance purchase, it comes out of the EMS fund. You'll also see grants, if there's possible grants that the town will be going after, or school. You'll also see bond for some of our larger ones, and what we will give you as we start discussing those is we can give you some sample bond payment schedules. When the police comes and presents to you, they have a new police station a few years out, $35 million. So in the matrix, it doesn't look like a big expense because you have that bond offsetting revenue, but then you'd be paying that down, the principal and the interest over whether it's 20 or 30 years into the future through your operating budget. And I think the only other, and once in a while if there's something different, I know I've got a couple that I've got marked as grant/other because it'll have to probably be a donation, capital fundraising campaign, that kind of thing.
Part of the importance of that, when you look at tax impact of a project, if we're using either CIP or a fund we've created, or bonding, the tax impact isn't in that year. It's either we've already paid for all or a portion of it, or you're stretching it out into the future. In more primitive times, we showed it all in 1 year, which isn't a realistic portrayal of tax impacts. And when we try to even out tax impact, you need to know the payment schedule for that. You take a big expense and pay it out over infinite years, you don't notice it. It's when you have to pay it out in 1 year. Okay, that's the quick very quick tour through what we're going to do. The product we come up with is the matrix that should be sitting beside you.
So it should be the blue matrix that you'll be working
this
off
one?
of.
Okay.
Yes, working off of this evening. But the green one is a replacement from DPW, so.
But let's look at the green one just as an example. What it does, you can see on the left, it lists, and here it's vehicles, because DPW, expensive toys. They list them all. They list the costs. And then, as you go out, they give you some information on age. One of the things we'll learn is hours of operation is more important than mileage. Notice they give, right back about the middle column, department priority, 1 through 4. Then the next is the funding source. These are all tax appropriations, as it turns out, because we try to put these on a kind of regular schedule. And then look at off to the right, across the top, the years in which they will be, we hope, according to the plan at least, acquired. So we're stretching out into the future. And it's the current year and then 5 more years. And then over on the right, there'll be some, in the memo, they can give you some information. So we're really looking out several years, although we tend to focus, and Tim especially wants to focus on current year. Some of us like to project a little further into the future and see what's coming. And then you look down below, those are the vehicles, capital projects. Same thing on projects, remember, it includes both equipment and projects. We do the same thing. So that's sort of the summary. And go back to the blue matrix now, we're going to be filling that in on stuff. And there'll be a category for each department, and then for fire, police, DPW, I guess.
We've made a little bit of a change in the structure this year. In the past, on the town side, we had vehicles in one section, then you'd have to flip and
Okay.
find. We've actually kept all the departments
Oh, good.
together to try and make it a little bit easier for conversations at this level and then presentations in the future. So you'll see the first page, you've got admin, you've got all my projects as well as any offsetting revenue there. And then, so when we get to DPW will have all of their vehicles in the 6 years, and then they'll go right into their projects.
Okay, good. We're not that bright. I've confused this in prior years. But these guys,
Well,
this group is much brighter than.
and we may make some more changes. We're trying to make this as accessible to everybody, rather than, just the spreadsheet people in this building.
Look for at page 3. I just picked this as an example. You see Public Works, and then down below there's a revenue source. So we're trying to take into consideration revenue source. Highway block grants are a big one for DPW. So when we do our assessment, we see that too. Bear in mind, these numbers, though, as I said earlier, are estimates. You're projecting out in time without, kind of grunt work that you do. So they could come back with inflation or whatever and be wildly different. That's all they are. But for our purposes, that's pretty much all we need. Anybody have any questions? There's a lot of stuff to throw at you, but you're all very bright. There'll be a quiz at the end of the class, though. Okay, if we don't have any questions, we're going to jump then into the first presentations.
Okay.
Our administrators.
And I apologize if the worksheets are in a little bit different order. I'm going to take them in year order, so I'll start in 2027.
Okay, we're on page 1 of the blue.
Yep,
blue
page
matrix.
1. So the first one we have is parking lot repair, reclamation, as well as repointing of the granite curbing outside and the brick sidewalk. This has been a long project for those that have been experienced with CIP, and the reason this one gets bumped up is the drainage that comes down from North Mast into Church Street through the parking lot and goes out under the parking lots of Ace are all tied in. So we are trying, we will be coordinating with DPW as they do their Church Street repairs. So as Adam and DPW, if they move their Church Street out to a different year, we will move ours out. So they've got so this one we may be moving, depending on where Adam falls with his projects this year, and what he has for future plans. But really, it's, we've had a sinkhole out here probably about 5 years ago that DPW repaired. We've had some washout where some of the fine material underneath the back end of the building had washed out for a while, which suggests some drainage issues. So what we'd be looking to do is work with DPW. They'll be upgrading any of the drainage structures that's needed for Church Street and that part, but then we'll just be really just making sure that the parking lot is safe, and then the sidewalks and everything are safe as well. So
I noticed you've taken out on the matrix the numbered lines, line numbers on the left column.
yeah, I'm seeing that too, and that's not very good.
No.
We'll put those in for your next meeting.
Yeah, what I'm talking about, they used to have a column for line numbers, so you could say, look at line 47.
Well, I will correct that issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you skip the Grassmere Town Hall?
So I started in 2027.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to kind of do it more chronologically, but I can answer any questions on the parking lot.
Does DPW do the work?
Probably not. A lot of the times when we've had, when the fire station 2 in Penardville, they actually contracted that out. When the fire station over here, they contracted that out. It's all going to be coordinated. We'll have to coordinate. The biggest question is going to be the drainage, but DPW really, for them to do a small, it takes them off some of the bigger reclamation work that they're doing. So if it's as simple as, you know, grind down the top of the pavement, put a new layer on, then we would probably have contractors do that. The repointing of the granite and all that, we would definitely have contractors do that because DPW contracts that out as well.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Roll, keep going.
Okay, so the next one is Grassmere Town Hall ADA Elevator Addition. This is in 2028. The Grassmere Town Hall is over near the traffic circle in Grassmere, where Mary Lou is. This is a phase 6 of a 6-phase project. So when the town saved this building back in the 90s, they began on a long restoration project. We have gotten many grants in the last 30 years to fix the foundation, the roof, the siding, to fully restore the second floor where the theater is, to redo the fire sprinkler system as well as the fire alarm. We've installed a permanent septic system there. We've done a lot. The HTC has done a lot of work there.
HTC being historic.
His Historic District Commission, they're the primary overseers. The last piece is to try and provide ADA accessibility to that second floor so that we can have more community events there. We do have some people that rent out the building from time to time. Right now, it's estimated that a project would cost about $1.4 million as it's currently planned. We do have just over $440,000 in a capital reserve fund that was funded through 3 separate votes by the voters, 3 separate deposits. So a good portion of this will need to be grant funding or a capital donation campaign. LCHIP is the most likely grant source, and they're 50% grants.
Why don't you
So
explain LCHIP?
LCHIP is when anybody records deeds at the Registry of Deeds, there is a surcharge. It's called, so it's the Land Conservation Heritage.
I was
It's,
going to ask you to do it because I couldn't remember.
it's really, it has 2 main focuses: land conservation and historical preservation. So this is a state agency. They collect a fund when people record deeds, so when you sell a piece of property, there's a $25 surcharge. And every year, they give out grants to organizations to either conserve land or to fix up historic buildings. We were fortunate enough in 2008, 2009 to get an LCHIP grant that funded 50% of the restoration of the second story where the theater is. We've gotten many other grants. We've gotten art grants to restore the hand-painted stencils, to restore the hand-painted curtains. We've gotten probably about half of the restoration of that building has been grants. So this is really the last piece, and the Historic District Commission is right now trying to get their architectural plans kind of finalized and satisfy the state historian so that we could go for a LCHIP grant in the future.
It's called Land and Community Heritage Investment Program.
Yes.
It's a mouthful.
I'll remember that until I get home.
All right.
Any questions on
Oh,
No, I'm good.
So in the worksheet we were provided in the binder,
yeah.
it was discussing it as though the LCHIP and the capital reserve fund would be at about 700,000. That we would get that up to that point, and that we were like based off of the $1.4 million cost. I am looking at the matrix that we were provided, and it's showing the LCHIP and the capital reserve fund being at 450,000, which is closer to what we currently have in.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so I was just wondering.
No, that should be 700,000, and what we would have to do is put in another 250,000 of other funding, whether that's a capital donation campaign, whether that's some type of tax credit. But yeah, no, we can definitely make that correction.
Because I was then noticing that difference in what we would have to make up.
Yeah, as we go through these, we will find even our staff makes mistakes when they have to deal with a spreadsheet that looks like this, so we'll find numbers and correct them. Yeah, thank you. We rely on some of you to spot them.
Okay, so the next project in 2028 is the Goffstown Master Plan update. So a master plan is done by the planning board for basically what is the direction of your community. It looks at land use, it looks at community facilities, transportation, energy, water, recreation facility, it looks at everything. We last did ours it was last adopted by the planning board in 2020. So it was adopted in December of 2020. We started that process in December of 2018 at a cost at that time of $25,000. So this is a little bit more based on what we've seen from some other communities. We may be able to do it for a little bit less, but this is a requirement of state statute, and it's recommended that it's done every 5 to 10 years. So you're talking about a 2-year process. That way started in 2028. You're finishing it up in 2030. At that point, it's 10 years. You're replacing that. So, yeah.
Tim, you'll see that the master plan is a planning tool. If you don't have it, your zoning classifications can be attacked fairly easily. You know, if you want to have a compatibility between planning goals and zoning, and the master plan is what links those. So once your master plan gets too old, your zoning classifications can be attacked by, appeals saying, well, you're not compatible in how you zone the town with your master plan. That's why from a planning board perspective, you'll see this is a critical document. And then it supports, as I said before, also our impact fees. So it's important to spend that money. It's kind of fun to do anyway.
Okay, no questions on that one. So the next one is a project in 2029. This is a network hardware refresh. We last did this in 2022 at a cost of about $232,000. So this is really, and you're going to see a related project the following year in 2030. So this is the network hardware refresh. This is switches, firewalls, wireless access points. And in 2030, you'll see the data center refresh. Data center, that's your servers, that's your brain. this is the network, this is your nerve system, this is your spinal column that delivers all that information to it. So, industry standards on the private sector, these are done closer to 5 to 7 years. So we are near the end of that, but we have also included some money in our operating budget to switch some of these items out. We're also working a little bit to reduce some of the load on our servers and this infrastructure by taking some of our really critical systems and moving them to cloud hosted servers that are hosted by the company, by the actual software companies that we're using. So it's a little bit of both. It's some of it's on-site servers, some of it's cloud, so it's a mix of both. But so that related one, your data center infrastructure refresh. Again, this is your hardware, this is your servers. This was last done in 2022 at a cost of $130,000. So we did both kind of in the same time.
If you look at your matrix, it's under technology. It's a good example. On the priorities, note some are 2, and they're earlier, and then 3 desirable, they get moved up. That desirable may become necessary at some point. So typically, if it's a category 3, it just means it's further down in the matrix, but as we get closer to needing that, it will move to higher priority. So don't think 3 means we don't need it, we just don't need it now.
Yeah, because I think if you look in your handbook, the committee's actual priorities does list of, is it needed this year, is it 2 to 3 years out? So I tried to follow those a little bit.
But doesn't mean it's not important, it's just we can get by for a while.
The other project we have in 2030 is the Goffstown Select Board has formed an ad hoc committee to look at construction of a pedestrian bridge over the Piscataqua River at the old railroad abutments. That committee, working with the Select Board and DPW, did submit an application in January 2025 for a New Hampshire Department of Transportation, a Transportation Alternative Program grant. So that's a TAP grant. That is our most likely funding source. It's matching funding. We did not score as highly as we would have liked, and I think the ad hoc committee has learned from that, and they are working on that. And I'm sorry, I said a 50-50. That's actually an 80-20 grant. So the next time that grant comes around, they want to be more prepared. So they are working on that. They're going to be reaching out and starting a pledge. They're going to be presenting to the select board and doing a capital pledge program to potentially do that in 2030. We estimate the project cost to be about $1.5 million based on escalation of some other similar projects around the state.
So you see when we present these projects, they're not all having necessarily a tax impact because they're relying on other funds or they're being paid over time. So sometimes people panic, oh my God, how can we do that? Well, you got to read the fine print a little more and see.
And this one's going to be a complicated one as we get closer, because the biggest thing is we're going to have to, what is the added operating cost of bridge maintenance, as well as road regular maintenance, whether it's snow removal, but also maintaining it and checks like that. So that as we get closer, we'll fine tune that.
Okay. If you look, is that the last presentation?
I've got one more in 2031.
Okay.
And that is access and security hardware refresh. So in 2021, the town installed a town-wide CCTV that is very useful to police and emergency services on town-owned buildings. It does not include the school. So in 2031, that system will be 10 years old. We do regular maintenance on it. We do replace existing hardware as needed, but in 10 years, we'll likely need to replace that.
Thank you. Go to the last page of the blue matrix. Down at the bottom, town total tax appropriation. Tell me if I'm reading this, but these are, remember we talked about our goals in scheduling these is to even out from year to year tax impact in that year, so you don't get big swings. And you look at how it projects, again, these are estimates, over the next 6 years, and you're within a fairly tight range. 27 is low, and I don't know if that's being conservative.
I think it is being conservative. I will share with you, Olivia and Richard are very knowledgeable about this. Over the last 3 years, our CIP projects have not survived the budget process. So in 2024, we were under default budgets. We had a much reduced with our capital projects. 2025, even though the budget passed, it had much reduced capital projects, and last year this year we're default again. So again, much reduced capital projects. So I think what you're seeing in 2027, some of those is a recognition of, yes, this CIP is a planning tool, but department heads also have to be realistic of when we make that transfer over to budget and select board for the budgeting piece of it.
Yeah. The editorial comment I'll make is you can only fall behind for so long, and then there's catch-up time.
Bill comes due.
Yeah, it does. So, question, do you save money? But that's a discussion that somebody can have. But you see on the years after that, it's reasonably consistent, again, giving estimated costs and numbers of change. Now, this does not have the school side, which is large, but
Reasonable is the word you're looking for.
yeah, reasonably large. But, so, big piece when you look at total tax impact, but you'll see a similar, spread, so.
And the school does take a different approach, because they do have their capital reserve fund that they put into annually, and then they draw a lot of their projects out of, so.
The other challenge we're gonna see is school board has to budget essentially 9 months further down the road because of their fiscal years. We're on a calendar year and they're on a September 1 year, right? So we're gonna see their numbers get a little squishier because it's so far in advance. So not quite the same, but it's the same concept of presentation. Okay, any other questions about what we've seen tonight? I appreciate having presentations that are well presented and abbreviated. I don't know if that's the right word. And most of the boards do that. This is what we're going to do. But as you look back at the administrative and MISC sheet under the names in our schedule, you'll see the department presentations, how they're scheduled. We will move those around as necessary if for some reason somebody's not ready, or we need them to come back for further information. Occasionally that happens. But you can see that school district is a big item, so that's going to take up a big meeting. The advantage of having the police and fire is we can let them negotiate with us of who's going to give us the most fun rides on their equipment. And then Public Works, similarly, I'm still waiting to run an excavator, so let's see what we can get out of them this time. Okay, anything else that we need to do tonight? Joanne?
No?
Just another question on page 1 of the matrix that might be a number issue. Looking at under 2030 for the DOT Transportation Alternative Program grant, is that supposed to be 1.2 million? And
Yes, yes it is.
I think I know who we're going to hire as our proofreader from now on.
Yes.
And if you need a job, my law firm's always looking for proofreaders. Okay. That it? Richard, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Tim, second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, carried. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.